Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to National Design Month. I'm Vasu Janopoulos, Acting Deputy Director of Education at Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. Throughout October, we're celebrating the power of design with our 2021 National Design Award winners in a series of free virtual education programs. Visit cooperhewitt.org/awards to learn more about the winners and to sign up for additional programs. I'd like to thank our leadership sponsors, Facebook, Shelby and Frederick Gans, Helen and Edward Hintz, the Hirsch Family Foundation, IBM, and Crystal and Chris Saka for making this program possible. And thank you for joining us for today's Designer Spotlight, where we'll go behind the scenes with our 2021 National Design Award winner for Communication Design, Imaginary Forces. Specializing in design-based visual storytelling, the studio is behind some of the most iconic title sequences, including for Marvel, Mad Men, Boardwalk Empire, and Stranger Things. And today we'll get a glimpse into their process and see some fun and interesting artifacts and props in their LA studio. As always, we invite you to join the conversation in the chat. If you have any questions, please add those to the Q&A box. We'll bring those in throughout the program, and we'll also save a bit of time at the end for more. Today's program is being recorded, so you can find it on the Cooper Hewitt YouTube channel later. Closed captioning is also available through the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. Before we get started, a huge congratulations again to Imaginary Forces on winning the 2021 National Design Award for Communication Design, and also on celebrating your 25th anniversary. It's now my great pleasure to turn it over to Imaginary Forces Managing Partner and Co-founder Chip Howden and Director of Marketing Natalie Golden, who'll be with us behind the scenes. Take it away.
Thank you, Vaso. Hello, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. First, I just wanted to introduce Natalie, who is going to be working behind the scenes, sharing different videos and photos and items like that. But Natalie, at any point, this is behind the scenes at Imaginary Forces Studio. Please just speak up, jump in, and thanks for helping out on this.
Thanks, Chip, I will.
All right, great. Well, first of all, Cooper Hewitt, thank you so much. We're so honored with this award. And I think I told Vaso when we found out that we were selected for communication design, I had goosebumps. I really did, because it's such an honor. And the idea that we get to be part of the conversation around design in what we do and in the country is a big deal for us. And what we're going to do today is we're going to take a sort of sneak peek behind Imaginary Forces Studio. I have a bunch of props over here that I want to share, and we're going to talk a little bit about not just the props, but the process, what Imaginary Forces has been doing over the last 25 years. But just before I start with that, it's a little ironic that I'm in the studio today, and Natalie happens to be there. A couple of other people here, but for the past, I think it's now been almost 20 months, we've been working remotely. And I would say that the majority, almost everybody within the studio is working remotely, and that could be here in Los Angeles, or it could be in New York, or in the UK, or in wherever our designers, artists have moved. And we're really kind of rethinking what that means moving forward. But today we are in the studio, and we look forward to some combination of working remotely and being in the studio, because there's nothing like that collaboration. As Vaso mentioned at the beginning, if you have any questions during this process, ask them. Natalie will capture them and then ask them, and then we can hopefully keep this very interactive in that sense, so that we're sure we're sharing the insights and the knowledge that you want to hear about. Just real quickly, again, Vaso mentioned 25 years. This Halloween, October 31st, will be our 25th anniversary. We formed the company. Most of us originally came from R. Greenberg Associates, which is now called RGA, and formed Imaginary Forces 25 years ago, working out a deal with Bob Greenberg and saying, Bob, we want to go off on our own. We had worked with him for many, many years. And that was 25 years ago. I did have hair then. Usually I like to get some special effects and add some, but I didn't have time today. But 25 years, it's crazy how fast that goes. And if you're new and you're a student, or if you're just in the business in the audience today, remember, it goes so fast. I know everybody says that, but it really does. And we have artists that are in college. They may be an intern or just out of college. And we have people at the studio that have been with us for the past 25 years. And so it's a real range of forces here. We started in Hollywood. We formed a company 25 years ago, working primarily with the film studios. So back then, we were involved in, and most of our reputation is around main titles. We do a lot of other work, but back then, we would go in and we would meet with a filmmaker, and we would, and maybe the producer, studio post-production supervisor, editor, a couple of other people, and we'd listen and hear about their film. And he or she, the director typically, would have been on this film most of the time, a year, 2 years, and then bringing us in to help them introduce the film or help them with a little bit of backstory, whatever their need was. And it's really important for us to listen and understand their need. We've taken that skill set and we've applied it over the last 25 years, not just with film title sequences, but with all sorts of different partners. And just to give you a little taste of what IF's done, some of you have probably seen this, some of you may not have, but we're going to just play a real quick 1.5 minute video that just shows a little bit of IF, and then we'll keep going from there. So Natalie, you want to give it a shot, please? Thank you, Natalie. I don't know if everybody saw that. There were a couple little brown or no gray boxes on my view. Not sure what that is, but here we are, technical excellence over at Imaginary Forces. Hopefully that won't be on all of our videos, which is something when presenting comes up, especially now, right? Especially when we're all remote like this. And it's happened as recently as last week for us, where we were presenting ideas to the CMO, the CEO, the other executives of a company, and had problems with sharing some of the presentation. Even though we practiced, even though we rehearsed and made sure that we felt really good about it, and at those moments, boy, do you sweat. And hopefully we're not going to have many of those today. But as you could see from that video, a lot of different work, and all of it starts with design. And if it doesn't matter if it's a filmmaker or if it's a big brand or it's a partner that is trying to get their idea out there or create some kind of action, we have to understand what that need is. And so our first stop in this process is that design phase. And the design phase, we're getting all of the information from our client, from our partner, and it can be a written brief, it could be a telephone conversation or a meeting in person. It could be them showing us or asking us to read a book or show us their research and their current work in place. And it's just getting all of that information and being able to then take it back to the studio and figure out the best way of solving that problem. Very often, the assignment or the brief is being worked out together with our partner. One example, and I'll start from something very early on, or not very early on, but many years ago, when we met with Matt Weiner for Mad Men. Now, Matt's a writer. The guy, he can write and create worlds and characters and all of that. He sent us ahead of our meeting a 1.5 page typed out written brief. And it was one of the best briefs I've seen, even though I've seen a lot of good briefs. But this was beautiful in just the way that it was written and talking about the world and the character and the time. And then we jumped on the phone with him and he took us through that written brief. And from there, we had a pretty good understanding of what he was imagining. And we came back with ideas that were very graphic, like the one that ultimately ended up being the title sequence, but we also came up with live action versions where we had cameras going through a neighborhood and into the city and into the ad agency. So there are lots of different approaches we'll take early on for a design phase, a concepting phase. I'm trying to think what would be a good, let me just show you something right here for a second. Actually, this is a good one. And most of these props, by the way, are not usually right behind my desk right here. We kind of put them together from the studio. This is actually the original, I don't know if you can see that very well. I know there's a lot of reflection there. This is the original storyboard that we presented to David Fincher for the Seven main title. We were actually still part of RGA at that time. We were working out our deal with Bob and his team in terms of forming Imaginary Forces. But as you can see, and they weren't framed when we presented to David, by the way. These are just because we kept them. But you can see this was hand drawn. The descriptions were typed out. So we had one of our designers sitting there on a typewriter typing out the descriptions, and then somebody cutting and pasting and putting it on boards. And then you can see there's sort of either notes that David made during the presentation or notes that we did and added to that. But this is how we used to present back then in terms of our early presentations. Now, where are we today? We have, sometimes sorry about that. Sometimes we'll draw something out to help express that idea, but oftentimes it's using Photoshop, or it's putting something into motion or creating something in CG to help explain that idea. So we've gone from hand-drawn artwork and typing out descriptions to presenting pieces in motion with music, with animation to help express an idea. And that idea isn't the final piece. That's just to get to communicate an approach. So over these 25 years, we've gone from really craft, handmade visuals to now pieces that sometimes feel like it's the final piece. And you have to really understand your audience and understand who you're presenting to. Everything that we do, every single thing we do, we have to think about the audience. And if that's the audience that's sitting in a theater, that's the audience looking at their watch or on a billboard, but it's also the audience in terms of the filmmaker or the marketing executive or the whoever our client or partner is. How are we expressing that idea to them, ultimately for their audience? And so you really have to think about it in stages. You can't just think, well, this is it. This is the idea. We're good. We have to think about it in terms of, okay, we're presenting it to our key client. Who do they need to present it to? What's the best way to have them then express it if they have to share it with somebody else? And ultimately, is that going to be experienced with the client? And with the audience, if that audience is an audience that is sitting in a theater or is sitting in a bus and seeing a big billboard in Times Square, is very different kind of audience, right? In terms of captured versus somebody that may or may not see something. And so we're always trying to understand who our audience is, if it's to present an idea, and who our audience is in terms of the final output and how someone's going to experience that. And I think that's a really important lens to put on over and over again as you go through that early process, because selling the idea is as important as creating the idea. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point. Natalie, did you want to ask me anything, or did anybody want to ask anything at this moment?
We do have one question
Okay.
from Alex Gardas. He asks, how can we include more students, most of them first-generation college students from underserved communities, in the world of graphic design and motion graphics, and give them opportunities in academic design programs and design studios? Many of them lack the resources and access to technology needed to enter our profession. Thank you.
That's a great question, Alex. And could everybody hear Natalie's question being asked? Yes, great. Well, Alex, the question, the way I just understood it is, how do we get more students, certainly students from underserved or different areas of our world that don't have access to an expensive art college or a technology? And that is a huge part of what we're trying to figure out. Well, actually, I think Cooper Hewitt in a lot of ways is doing that. I know in the past we have participated in programs with the museum where going out to public schools around the city and hopefully beyond just New York, but around the country, and trying to explain to young minds that, wow, design, there's a real opportunity here in so many areas, right? It's not just for film, it's not just for television, it could, or advertising, there's a new canvas everywhere with the way technology is working, and so game, and you name it. And so how do we get people exposed to that in ways that really add to the visions, because that is so important. And what we're doing, honestly, if I'm totally in the past, we probably had a dozen go-to schools where we would recruit for internships, for artists, and we teach at those at the courses at those wonderful art programs, and that is an incredible resource for a company like Imaginary Forces. But where do we have to go beyond that? And at what stage? Is it really at college, or is it at high school, or is it even before high school? And that has become a big part of our internal process with our resource hiring managers, with our creative directors, in terms of where they go and share. We're working on it. We're not nearly where we want to be, but if we don't do that, that's bad for everybody. That's bad for, look, I'm a business owner. From my standpoint, it's a bad business because we're not coming up with the best solutions then, because the best solutions are the solutions that bring in a lot of different points of view, experiences, and be able to express those in a lot of different ways. And we do it on a very small level right now, where we'll have 3 different artists come at something, at a project, so that we can come with an approach that looks like this, another one that is expressed this way. And that was the way, that's what we've done since the formation. But how do we even go beyond that? How do we go into thinking in terms of all of the other aspects that we need to consider in terms of these solutions? And so our job, as certainly now that we're part of the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award group, it's our job to really push design and make it more accessible and more interesting, and show that there is an unbelievable opportunity out there for all of us if you get exposed to it early on. I mean, look, I was lucky. I started as a messenger at our Greenberg Associates back in, I don't know, the 80s or something like that, and got my foot in the door. I had no idea what motion graphics was or graphic design back then, but by getting in there and being a messenger, I was exposed to it. So it was something that I was so fortunate to be able to experience, and look what it's done. It's given me such an amazing life in terms of all the people and the projects and business and all of that I've gotten to experience. And that's got to be something that so many people get to experience. So I may be answering that, maybe not totally. And if I'm not, I apologize. But we got to do a better job at it, and would totally be open to getting suggestions in the future. And anybody that's on this program today can reach out to us, can reach out to Natalie as follow-up with questions, with suggestions, with anything like that. I've taught it at art schools before, and I always said to the class, gang, you're now part of the club, right? All of you know each other. All of you are now able to tap into each other and tap into Imaginary Force and tap into us. Well, now how do I do that in areas that I've never been to and can explore? I have to think that way and open it up. So we will, because relationships are so important in this business. We can go, I mentioned already David Fincher and Matthew Weiner, and I could keep going on in terms of the people we've met throughout our career at Imaginary Forces, and how they come back to each other. When we won the award we wanted to thank everybody that was part of IF. And we created a video, and I'm sure we missed so many names, and I apologize to everybody we've missed, but we took everybody we could remember over the last 25 years that were part of the Imaginary Forces team, or great collaborators, not our clients, not partners like that, but everybody that helped make and create. And it came out to, I think, around 1,400 names. And I'm sure we missed, not 1,400, but we missed a lot of names. And we just did a thank you that way. And it was amazing to look at all of those names and to see all of the different relationships that we had built over those years. This just reminded me of something, and occasionally you'll see me go a little off track. I did pull this up just this morning. This is, I don't know if you can see that. This is Jim Henson Pictures. And this is something we had downstairs on a shelf. But our Imaginary Forces' very first job, official job, when we formed the company on Halloween 1996, whatever it was, and answered the phone as Imaginary Forces. Our first client was the Jim Henson Studios and creating their logo. So we took this as this was a frame that we created. We put in a little plastic frame. It was our first check that we received from as Imaginary Forces, and it was great. It had Kermit the Frog on it. It was in color, and back then I had to go to a Kinko's color to get a color Xerox, and I Xeroxed the check. Because I was like, oh my God, it's the first check we got as Imaginary Forces. And I recently saw that. I'm a little bit of a hoarder, but I didn't have it today, but I did see this. And that was our very first project as an entity of Imaginary Forces. I've recently spoke to Brian Henson and his team. And here, that was 25 years ago. And again, we're reconnecting after all of those years. And that's not only with clients and partners, but that's with all of our artists and our collaborators. Is there a question that you're asking, Natalie? Are you suggesting I move on? Natalie's suggesting that I move on. And so I will. And I'll get back to that other point in just a second. But what I wanted to do is show another piece of to give an example of sort of the then and now. When we formed the company, Peter Frankfurt, one of the co-founders, so Kyle Cooper, Peter Frankfurt, and I, we were all working for RGA back then, formed the company, and with some key people at the same time. Karen Fong and Linda Nakagawa and a whole group of people. Michelle Doherty came in very shortly after that, and a lot of people I'm not mentioning right now. But when we formed the company, Peter, within, I would say, probably 8 weeks of forming the company, said, "Hey, Chip, you know what? That project I was working on for Marvel looks like it's going to happen." And it was for Blade. It was the first Blade film that David Goyer wrote. Peter was the producer. Wesley Snipes obviously was Blade, and that first film was directed by Stephen Norrington. And I said, "Oh, wow, that's great. What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, it means I'll be out of the office a little bit while doing this, but I'm around." But that, I didn't see him for almost a year after that. Not really, and I'm not really complaining, but that was right at the beginning, and that was our first Marvel interaction, our first Marvel collaboration. And a few years after that, they came to us and said, "Will you create our logo for theatrical release?" And so I think that was in 2002. And in 2002, we created the first Marvel logo, which Natalie's going to play right now. And I'm going to show this, and then we're going to show you what happened after that. Go ahead, Natalie. Okay, well, that wasn't, it plays back a little differently in the theater, a little chunky there. And but so that was the original opening we created. Many years later, Marvel came back to us after they had made their deal with Disney and had Marvel Studios. So this was different than the original one, but they wanted to come up with a new version of the logo. But how do you hold on to all of the heritage of the original animation? And so this next one, which was done in 2013, so this 11 years later, we created this piece, which Natalie's going to show. So as I mentioned, that was done in 2013, and that example is a really good one in terms of what I think one of the things we're good at, which is being able to see something that was created before, and how do you keep all of the DNA and all of the key aspects of that expression and update it and make it relevant or more accurate for today. Now, just a quick little asterisk, we have not done the other logos, the more recent Marvel logos. We did the original one, and then we did that updated one in 2013. But at my point about updating and keeping things relevant, we've had to do that for 25 years. If we were still doing the same things that we were doing 25 years ago, we would be out of business. But what we've been able to do is we've been able to hold on to the pieces of the past that are so powerful and so connected to the audience or to our experiences, to culture, and then being able to express it again in a more sort of relevant, updated version. And we've done that for many different partners over the years. And from a design standpoint, that's something we talk about a lot internally. Sorry, it looks like my lighting just went out a little bit there. But what we'll do is you don't want to throw out everything, right? You want to hold on to the really key pieces and then be able to express it in a way that gets people excited today. And we've done that with HBO, feature presentation. We've done it over and over again with different entities. And I have one thing I wanted to show you here. This is this is coming out as a t-shirt this year for our 25th anniversary. This was Imaginary Forces. We created this, an artist named Wayne Coe actually created it. He's great. He used to be a storyboard artist that we worked with all the time. We said, Wayne, we've been asked to do a company photo for, I think it was for Communication Arts. And we all got dressed up kind of like I am right now and stood in front of a projector that we had at our old studio. And we had a picture taken. We looked at it. We're like, oh my gosh, that's going in the article. We looked very conservative and quite geeky. And we said, we can't do that. That's awful. Let's not do a photo. Let's create Imaginary Forces the way we want to express it. And so we had Wayne create us as sort of Marvel superheroes, sort of. Actually the publication loved it, and we did throw away the photo because we looked so not so great. But that's something that's hanging around in the office here. What I'd love to do, unless there's some questions right now, is just so when we formed the company, we were primarily working with studios. Today, we're primarily working with streaming platforms. It's amazing how within this time period, and doesn't mean we don't work, we still work with studios, but often we're working with large streamers also. And we have to think again about who our audience is, who our clients are, and how do we take what we know and then bring that forward. And we're constantly doing that. We have to think about the different canvases. At one point, it was a theater screen. Now it can be anything from your watch to this screen that we're looking at right now, to a giant screen in Times Square that's the size of a football field or almost. And each one of those have their own challenges. And so not only are we thinking about the audience, we're thinking about how they are experiencing that content, that idea that we're expressing, and we have to constantly be doing that and continue to do that. And it's during this last 25 years, the amount of times we've had to rethink those platforms, the way that we're expressing ideas and connecting with people, it's constant. And so as a designer, always be thinking about how are people experiencing something today? I mean, I watched my son, who's 11, watch a concert on a game recently, and the experience that was created for that, I thought, oh my God, that is so something we have to be able to understand and create experiences that live within that world, because that's such his world now, which is something that's nice having kids. You kind of can do a little bit of research at home while they're doing things that maybe they're not supposed to do while they do their homework. But it is really interesting to see how that evolves so quickly now. So quick, it's unbelievable how quickly it's changing for us, and for us to try to stay relevant. Are there any questions before we move on to the next piece?
Yes, we have a couple of questions.
Natalie's got some questions. Natalie, do you mind speaking up just so everyone can hear the question?
No, of course not. Our first question is from Frank, and he asks, how do you feel about the digital age and how it has affected creativity?
How do I feel about the digital age, Frank? Actually, Frank, my real name is Francis, but they call me Chip. My dad's name is Frank. Frank, good question. And because you're the same name, we're going to answer that. Digital versus traditional. We do this. That's really that's interesting. I would say that almost anything that we look at today has a combination of both. For instance, let me give you an example. Here's something. This is here is a now that's a traditional puppet element. Julian Moore for Lisey's Story. The oh my gosh, Stephen King. Sorry, I spaced out for a second. On Apple TV, we created a title sequence with this idea of puppets. And Karen Fong, the creative director, felt very, very strongly that if we just created it in digital, in CG, it wouldn't have the human emotional feel of a real puppeteer bringing them into motion. So we went and we actually created puppets, physical puppets, with amazing puppeteers, and we shot downstairs in our kitchen area. And she worked with her team and with Osbert. The two of them, and Osbert was actually on a Zoom from the UK, because at that point there were restrictions because of the pandemic. So here we are with Karen downstairs, with Osbert on Zoom in the UK, working with puppeteers that were bringing these the characters to life. And at the same time, we made digital CG versions of those puppets so that we could combine both physical, practical with digital. And because, well, first of all, to do it all just physically, we wouldn't be able to do the ideas that we created. We would only be able to get to them to a certain point. So the idea of blending digital with real practical photography is something we do almost on everything. Almost every project has some combination of the two. When Karen Fong was creating the God of War, which is a huge game that originally they came, Sony came to us and said, we want to show how Kratos has, we want to be empathetic towards his what he's gone through, why he's so mad, why he's going out there and fighting in this game. And originally the idea was to use a CG model because that's what Kratos was at that point. It was a CG model in the game. And Karen felt very strongly that if we were trying to create empathy and connect with this character, she wanted a real actor, a human portraying that story rather than just a CG version. And so we had to go out and we had to cast and go out and film the talent and then bring that back and then manipulate it digitally in lots of ways. And I will show you a little piece of that in a few minutes. But we love digital. This whole building is, we have a huge machine room downstairs. We've got every kind of technology you can imagine to be able to create the pieces we do. And at the same time, we will go and we'll shoot something in this conference room on the table, use our iPhone, bring in a camera, use Polaroids, do whatever we need to create the texture and the components for that. Did you have any other questions, Natalie, before? And Frank, I hope I answered your question.
We'll roll through them.
Okay, great. Wanted to just quickly show you something else here, which goes back to a little bit of what Frank was just saying, which is, should we actually, you know what I'm gonna do? We're gonna show a little bit of, one second, gang, I'm gonna get this. This was for the Pacific. The Pacific main title sequence, which is something that we were involved in many years ago. After working on Band of Brothers, on the Pacific, we met with the filmmakers, with the show creators, one of them being Tom Hanks. And he shared a story in a very early meeting with us about a relative of his who was a war correspondent during that war. And because of the humidity and because of the conditions that he was reporting from, he would create the report using charcoal rather than photography. And then they would do the drawing, roll it up, and then send it back to New York as part of a story. And when he was telling us that, we were like, oh my God, I love that idea. That's what a great idea. And we came up with this concept of expressing the title sequence using charcoal as a way of showing the characters, showing sort of the expanse of this a horrible war and what they went through, all of the characters went through, and the vastness of it. I think, do you have a piece that we can show first? Just let's show some of the reference elements, Natalie, please. So when we heard that idea, and that came from the filmmakers, that idea of charcoal, but that was one version of an idea we came up with. we did a lot of reference, looked at a lot of reference. And for the students, that's such an important part of our process. And it's such a quick way of being able to express an idea, both internally to your team, but also to your partner, to your client. And so we'll go and find different reference out there rather than have to start from scratch. If we started from scratch on every single thing we did, we'd have to add another 4 weeks to a design phase or even longer. And we would be going down a bunch of different avenues without quickly being able to understand what is feeling right for the client, for ourselves. And so in this case, we would do things, get as much sort of reference material, use that, bring that to our presentation meetings, as well as then storyboards and other elements. But this is an example of just some of the reference we pulled. Natalie, I don't know if you have the next piece there, which is, do you have the title sequence? I'd love to show just part of that. We don't have to see the whole thing, but I would like to show a piece of it in terms of how that then is translated to, and Natalie's pulling that up. Thank you. Maybe not. The reason I brought these up, I just found these drawings actually just the other day here. We did have this original piece, again framed, that was downstairs. These were just some of the characters from the Pacific that we had sketched with charcoal. And Natalie, do you have the title that we could just show just the beginning? Okay, so this is this the title? Let's take a look. So this is using a combination of footage from the film that we would then rotoscope and create the artwork. When we first presented this idea, I remember Steve Fuller had his team got close-ups of charcoal on the conference room table in our studio and used that as part of selling the idea. Which again, what's the best way of presenting? In that case, we made that change. A couple of dramatic close-ups of charcoal and how, because if you just say, oh, we're going to shoot some charcoal, but how it part of the storytelling and part of the picture of this show. So anyways, we can check that out. I believe that is that on the advanced page. Great. Oh no! Does anybody have any questions at this point? I wanted to make sure. I can't see anybody, so I just want to make sure that I'm responding. Natalie has another question.
There's a couple of questions from a couple of people, but I will selectively pick some out based on what you're talking about, but we will get to everyone, I promise. The first question is from Corinna. I hope I'm saying that right. Her question is, what's an example of what's different about making a title sequence for a studio versus a streaming platform?
Okay, what's the difference between creating a title sequence for a studio and a streaming platform? That's a good question. And I'm trying to think, are we doing both right now? The answer is yes. And in the future, I will tell you what they are, but we did sign non-disclosure agreements. So right now we're working with a film studio on a giant feature that will come out later this year, early next year. And what is different about that than working on a sequence we're doing for one of the streamers right now? Okay, one, I think schedules tend to be different. We tend to have a little bit more lead time with a streamer right now. Now that could be totally different for everybody, but in the case of the piece we're doing for the studio right now, that film is coming out fairly soon. And so we have about a 8-week, 10-week total concepting to final delivery of that piece. We're working with a couple of different streaming platforms right now with the show creators. Some of those shows are not coming out until the end of next year, or even during the summer of this year. Of 2022. And so there could be issues around scheduling, and that doesn't mean all of those that we do for a platform are that long. Some of them are short, like a studio. There's a little bit of a difference working with a filmmaker, the director of a film, where rather than working with a show, for example. Maybe you have the showrunner, but you have it tends to be a bit of a larger team involved in that, where when we typically work with a film director, we're working with that person and maybe one or two other key people. And with a streamer, we're working with tends to be a larger group. We're also thinking about it where you're doing a film that's hopefully it's in a theater, right? Hopefully it's coming out still. We're not dealing with those issues that we've been dealing with for the last 2 years, but that's coming out, and it's with a captured audience. It's in an IMAX theater, it's in a Cinemark theater, it's in AMC, whatever that may be, and they're sitting down and they're ready to watch that. Most of what we're doing for a platform like Netflix or Apple TV Plus or Amazon or whoever it may be, Hulu, that audience is going to watch it typically when they want to watch it, and so they're probably watching multiple that sequence multiple times, and so it's. Do we design differently though for that? I'm not sure. I think it's still coming up with the best idea and expressing that. But that is a consideration, and it is something that we will think about, or it'll be updated. Many of the projects we've worked on for the platforms now go into season 2, season 3, things like that, and some of them will update that title sequence. So that's another difference, and hopefully that answered your question.
We have another question from Andre, and he asks, or she asks, how do you approach the music score soundtrack and generate the mood?
Andre, great question about the soundtrack and the music. And this, I kid you not, we say this all the time. Imaginary Forces is a visual company. Everything we do is we're creating a visual expression of an idea. And everybody here will say the sound is probably 55%, at least 50% or more of that experience. If you look at any piece that we have created and you think about the audio and you think about the sound and how important that is in creating that experience, it's amazing. And we forget about that all the time. We forget because we're, oh my God, let's get, what is it going to look like? How are we going to create the image? How do we say that? And then we'll go, whoa, wait, sound. And the best pieces that we have created tend to be where the two are married very early on. and where we're going back and forth with a composer, with a sound designer, with whomever our partner may be. And I mean, if you think of the sequences that we're known for, in almost every case, the sound is so significant, so important in recognizing that property or that piece. So we love when we can do that together with our audio partner. Key, and every designer should think about that, because that is so important in terms of the emotional experience and the connection.
That's great. Thank you, Chip. Michelle has a question, and I think it actually flows to our next point now that we've gone through client brief and ideation. Her question is, can you walk us through your typical design workflow from client brief, ideation, finishing, and delivery? And how big are the teams and what are the players involved? Would you like to go into our production phase and give those examples?
Sure. So the question that I understand it be is starting from concepting all the way through final production, and what does that look like, and what are some of those teams and that process? Natalie, do you have something? Well, actually, why don't I start with that first part? We've looked at some early storyboards. Here's some boards that we created for Lisi's story. I think this is Lisi's story. Yes, it is. And so putting together, in this case, this is a shooting board. This is so that we could create a very complete sequence. What we'll do is we'll go basically through the entire sequence with an image, and then we'll take these images and we will string them together and edit them, hopefully against a track that either we're finding or that the show is providing us with. But we will literally start off with first an idea, draw that idea out, and then put that idea down over, if it's a minute, 2 minutes, whatever that length is, and create just an edit of those images to get a sense of, wow, this is too much. There's too much we're trying to cram into this period of time, or ooh, we're feeling a little like this is dragging on. But it gives us a lot of information early on, not only for us, but for our artists, for the team, for our clients, to understand it, because ultimately that's what it is, right? It's not, it doesn't end up just as a image document. And then from there, once that's kind of figured out, we say, okay, do we have to shoot? Do we have to create CG? Or do we have to find stock footage? Do we have to, whatever we need? And that's all based on budget, that's based on schedule, that's based on accessible, being able to access certain elements. Almost always it's a combination of all of those. Rarely today is one thing just all CG or all live action or all just stock footage. Often it's a combination of all of those elements.
Would you like us to show Lisi's story?
Sure. You want to show Lisi's story? What do you have for that? The title? Okay, sure. You want to play that?
All right.
That's okay. While Natalie's pulling that up, as I mentioned, we filmed downstairs for part of this. We did a lot in computer graphics and then combined the two. And we're going to just take a quick peek at this. So several weeks of early design phase for that, coming up with the approach, the concepts, really understanding what the filmmaker wants and understand that, selling that then not only to the filmmaker, but to the studio, to the platform, and then figuring out how to create it and saying we're going to spend X amount of these shots are going to need to be shot on in practically. This many shots are going to be created in computer graphics. This many shots are going to involve separate elements, and then put together a team that probably that's in the area of 9-12 weeks, something like that, about 3 months of production, and getting the edit figured out and the compositing worked out. And those are tough projects. These are very, very difficult in terms of the detail, in terms of the rendering time, in terms of the polish. And almost all of these we get to sort of 90%, and it's that last 10% that kills us, right? In terms of pulling really late nights, trying to make it just as exquisite and beautiful as it can be, adding all of that fine lighting, the fine texture, all of that. And you'll see the team in that last 10% really digging in and trying to get there. And that happens over and over again, where we'll get it to a place that really feels good. And then that last 10% is what makes the difference. Yes,
Little
now.
Fires?
Little Fires. You want to show Little Fires? So Little Fires is something, again, we have the shoot we shot on a stage and created a whole bunch of props, and that prop just broke right there. I'm sorry, Karen and team, but this involved shooting on set, and I don't know if we have any of that background footage. Do you, Natalie? Can you show what do you have in terms of showing any of the fire footage?
Well, the main title itself shows a lot of the fires.
But we don't have any of the background of that. But again, this is something where we're shooting practical, we're adding CG, we're compositing to create the sequence. But if we don't have the background on that, I wanted to show something that's a combination of the two. What if we took a look at the God of War? Do we have the visual effects sort of breakdown on that? Could we just do that one, please, Natalie? So on that one, this is God of War. As I mentioned earlier, we shot Kratos as talent, and there are a lot of elements in that are both we shot practically, but then had to recreate and build in CG. On this piece that we did, we had a one-day shoot on a location just outside of Los Angeles, and a one-day stage shoot where we had green screen and some props and things like that, and 2 very long shoot days. Natalie is going to just show a little bit of the behind the scenes on that, and then I want to just explain that. Is that something you can pull up now? Great, thank you. Here you can see where we've got the real talent.
She was made to blow you away, and she don't care what any man say. Well, you can watch her strut, but keep your mouth shut, or it's ruination day. When now she's gone, long gone.
I remember on that last shot there of Kratos on the ground and the camera pulling up, we had a ring around the camera that was with rain coming out, with water coming down for the rain. And it was very, very late. It was the last shot after 2 long, long days of shooting, both on location and on the set. And I forget what time it was. It was late. It was in Hollywood on a stage, and that actor was so good. He was so into it and so realistic. But that was a jaggedy set piece, and all the rain was coming down, all the water was coming down on him, and it was super late. And he was just, and I had all that makeup that he started at 4 a.m. or something, had to get dressed in with the makeup. And when he finished, the whole crew who was standing there exhausted, they had been going on, and they clapped. And that was one of the only times I'd seen the entire crew applauding that performance at that moment at 11:30, whatever time it was on the last shot. And then to see it with all of the CG and all of the components to bring it to life, it's amazing. Again, there we're going with talent, but also computer graphics to create those ideas. Natalie, did you have a question you wanted to ask? Is that what?
Yes, we have a question from, I believe, Elion. I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly. Have you found that working remotely has affected your design process in a positive or negative way? I worked in design studios in New York, and the exchange of ideas happened organically as artists mingled and had a water cooler for interactions.
That's a great question. The question being, has the creative process changed, or the results changed working remotely versus working in the studio? And oof, boys, this is a question that we deal with every single day. At first, there was no issue. We all had to work remotely, and because of the recommendations and the guidance and all of that, and we went remote. And we thought back in July we were going to slowly transition back into the studio, and so we got everything set, and we're getting all the AC filters changed and all of the safety precautions, everything, and had the whole place ready to go right at the beginning of July. And unfortunately, the Delta variant started coming up then, but it hadn't really affected us at that point to the scale it ended up affecting everybody. But July 6th came around, and I was so excited. I got in the studio, and I was sitting here at my desk, at the one I'm sitting at right now, and no one came in. Not as maybe Larry, our IT head of IT, came in, but no one else came in, and I was stunned. And then I was like, Chip, relax. The reason is everybody still wants to stay safe and all that. Well, yes, safety definitely number one, right? Definitely. But also it was, wow, I'm getting a lot done at home, sitting in front of my computer and not getting distracted by everything around here. Oh, I don't have to sit in a car in LA for an hour in traffic and then park, and I'm going to work from home. And I totally see that part of it, and I'm the same way. I see all the pluses. I also know for a fact that those moments that you mentioned around the water cooler, overhearing or walking by somebody and hearing something being discussed, all of those moments we're missing right now. We're occasionally getting them when we schedule a Zoom meeting and we're able to all get on and have a conversation. But there's a lot that happens within a studio environment that just isn't there right now. So there are pluses of working remotely, and there are definitely some of the negatives. And what we have to do is figure out how to make both of those work. I know from my point of view that if you're new in the business, or if you're just starting at a new company, just doing that completely remotely, you miss so much. You miss the culture. You miss picking up. Oh, I'm watching a producer and an art director talk about a challenge, or are addressing an issue with a client. Even though I'm not part of that conversation, I'm hearing it, and I'm processing that and learning. So I think there's so much of that that's missing right now when we're all completely remote, and looking forward to figuring out what that right mix is, which won't be the way it was before the pandemic. It's not going to be, all right, everybody, 5 days a week, you're in the studio, you're working, all these hours, and then you're going home, right? That's not, that used to be the way it is, but it's not going to be the way in the future. And it's not going to be what it is today, which is, hey, no one's here at the studio, where everybody is remote. And so figuring out that balance and thinking about technology different, and how we can make and really kind of leverage the remote situation. But yes, I do believe that although we've created amazing work over these last almost 2 years, it'll be 2 years in March, where we've done all of that work remotely, or most of that work remotely. Yes, Natalie.
We have another question from Darius about God of War. How was the helmet made, and where was it from? If you know that answer.
Where was this from? Well, this was from Karen's office, where I just got it. But what we did is we shot this model. We made this with prop masters and prop builders, this was shot on stage. And it really was shot on stage for reference. So when we dropped it and it hit the ground, we used that as reference for the CG component. We didn't actually shoot it and have it live action and then change it to CG. This was more for reference, but also some of the talent was wearing, as you saw earlier in the location shoots, the talent was dressed with these helmets. And so it was both used for when we had live action talent, and it was also used for reference, so that our CG artist, who then created the disintegration of the helmet, had visual reference photography to work with in terms of lighting and motion and different things like that.
Thank you, Chip.
You're welcome.
We have 2 more questions before we wrap up. If anyone would like to submit a couple more questions, you're more than welcome. Our next question comes from Anna Drake. Your recent title sequence for Foundation was really beautiful work. To what extent would a client like Apple TV or the show team be involved at the concept stage in terms of matching the title design to the look and feel of the show? Also, how much time would a title sequence of that complexity take a team to build from concept to completion?
Okay, that's a great question. Is that somebody I know that asked that question? So the question was, or is, at what point, and I'm paraphrasing, does the filmmaker or the showrunners and the studio, or the platform, in this case Apple TV Plus, get involved in the concepting for that title sequence? So that's a unique situation on that project. As I mentioned very early on in this time together, Peter Frankfurt originally worked with David Goyer, who's the showrunner and the creator of Foundation, on Blade 1, 2, and 3. David wrote all 3 and directed the third Blade. So Peter's known David for 20 plus years. And very early on, we worked with both David and Apple in terms of understanding the scope and the storytelling of this piece. And so they were very, both Apple and Dave were very involved in guiding us in terms of what they were envisioning. And so that's something that we don't just go off and do on our own. That's and the best pieces are always that way, where they're so collaborative. But the development of that sequence was a very, very collaborative process. That was a long production. And the reason being is that was right when the pandemic was happening, and the show at one point had to be put on hold while they were doing the actual shoot in Ireland because of the pandemic. And so it took way longer than a typical title sequence it would take, because of some of the issues that surrounded putting things on hold. But a title sequence like that takes a long time. I'm going to say at least in a normal situation, at least 4+ months to create something like that. In this case, it even took longer, as I mentioned, because of schedule issues. But we love that sequence. We love the show. I don't know if you've seen the show. It's amazing. But we're excited to be part of that process and team.
Thank you, Chip. Our next question comes from Justin. His question is, what programs do your designers find themselves working in the most?
What programs do our designers work in the most? So when you're in early concepting, probably Photoshop, also After Effects, if you're putting something in motion, or Premiere, if you're editing a concept or an idea. Every project involves different software depending on what we're trying to do. It could be anything from CG software or particle system software, or different types of paint compositing. So we're using Nuke for a lot of compositing. We're using After Effects. We're using, and I'm spacing out right this second, and it's going to come to me. And if I stop answering this, it will. But it really depends on the idea, the artist team that we're pulling together, and usually it starts there. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the other names of software right now, but I'll come back to those. Yes, Natalie.
Thanks, Chip. Our next question comes from Trevin. How were you able to get in contact with these major studios? Did that take time? Did you go to them, or they to you? And he says, thank you.
A question being, how do we get in and actually get to pitch, or get to meet the filmmakers or the studios or the streamers? Is that the question, Natalie?
Yes, and the relationships that are built.
And the relationships. So yes, that is something that we're constantly working on. Look, when we formed Imaginary Forces, we were super lucky. We had just finished the title sequence for 7. That blew up in terms of visibility, and the phone rang a lot of we received a lot of calls. And when we formed the company, we're like, wow, this is easy. We just answer the phone and we get work. God, I didn't know it was this easy. And later on found out that's actually not how the business works, and that it takes a lot of pounding the pavement, of finding ways of connecting. It is all ultimately, I would say, your relationships and building on those. And if you do a great job for one person. Hopefully that person is then making a recommendation. So much of our work over these years has been based off of a referral, or based off of a piece that we created and someone saw it and said, hey, do you know anybody that might know the people that created that? So a lot of it's done that way. We also have a team. It's a small team, but a team that will say, that's an important project that we heard about. How do we find out how to get in and meet with them? And sometimes we're good at it. Sometimes we're not very good at it. But business development is the key to our business. Without the relationships, without the projects coming in, you don't have a business. So reputation, relationships, being proactive, finding ways of connecting, doing it in a way that you're adding value, not just saying, hey, what can I, what do you have for me? But hey, this is how I think I can help you, or we can help you. And these are some of the thoughts that we had around that. And if you're bringing value in early, there's a good chance that you can at least be in the conversation, not necessarily get it. And believe me, we've lost as many projects as we have done. There's as many moments where disappointments, where we weren't selected, or we didn't get the project for whatever the reason may be. And you just have to go, okay, move on to the next. Ooh, that hurt. And it hurts because you put so much into it and you care about it. But there are times that it's not for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chip. We have one more question.
One last question.
Yes, I'm sorry we can't get to everyone's, but we're running low on time here. So I'm with Christopher. Outside of entertainment and advertising clients, what was a favorite or particularly rewarding project, and how did such a client come to value Measuring Forces as a creative partner? Perhaps maybe something like Sonic C or one of those?
Christopher, that's a great question. Outside of entertainment, outside of some of the more well-known relationships we have, I would say a big part of our studio is how we can give back, or how we can make a difference, and in everything we do in the industry. One of my favorite engagements, and there are a lot of them, we've had some wonderful experiences, has been with the Natural Resource Defense Council, where we partnered with them to create a documentary film called Sonic C. And it was to help people understand the issues around noise pollution in the ocean, issues around shipping, sonar, seismic surveying, how all of that, without the proper solutions, guidance, regulations, was really decimating the whole ocean ecosystem. I didn't even understand that at first. When I heard ocean noise, I thought they were talking about beautiful waves and the crashing of seagulls and all of that. I didn't even understand that this was an issue, which is one of the great things about our business, is how much we get to learn and explore. But the idea of helping them put that idea out there and make change, right? I mean, that film was very successful. Not only that it was picked up by Discovery, that it won, we're so grateful, 2 Emmys, one for Best Documentary, Nature Documentary, and one for Sound and Music for Documentary, but also how it helped with some industry self-regulation, with legislation in terms of protection of certain areas for marine mammals. And so the idea of being able to express an idea and make some change, that's you got to do it, right? We all have to do it. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I'm being told that this is it for today. I wish I could meet all of you, and hopefully I will at some point, but super grateful for your time today. Thank you.
Yes, I know. That's been so incredible, Chip. Thank you so much to you and Natalie. It's looking like we might have to do a part 2 of this. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you all again soon at one of our other programs during National Design Month and beyond.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you, Cooper Hewitt.